Black women are losing their job at a faster rate right now. And historically, this should be a warning sign. This should be a five-alarm fire of economic trouble, but yet nobody's talking about it. It's not the front page of your newspaper. It's not the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It's not the front page of the Wall Street. It's not the front page of the New York Times, but we're talking about it right here. I'm Richard Fowler. This is the front line where there's no chaos. There's just content, and let's get right into it. So, the black women unemployment rate recently ticked up to 5.5 to about 6%. The national unemployment rate average is about 4%. Here's the reason why you should be concerned about these numbers. African American women are the most educated subgroup in America. Allow me to repeat that. Black women are the most educated Americans out of any other group of Americans. Period, point blank, full stop. So these job losses aren't low-wage jobs. These job losses aren't happening in the gig economy. These job losses are happening to college-educated workers and public sector employees. Let me be more specific. Teachers, accountant, veteran affairs nurses, pharmacists, and so much more. This is not about low-wage instability. These are hitting educated workers at an alarming rate. Black women also work in the public sector, which means they work in jobs that keep our communities together. They're registered nurses, they're teachers, they're public sector employees, meaning they keep our government going. They keep us healthy. They keep us safe. They keep our communities thriving. They make sure that our kids are healthy. And when their job go away, that's usually the canary in the coal mine for economic trouble down the road. Because these public sector jobs are usually safe jobs. These are jobs that, you never heard the saying, get yourself a good government job because it's not going anywhere. These are jobs that are stable, right? These are jobs that are healthcare support, education, government roles. Black women make up a critical share of public sector workers. And let me just give you the numbers so you understand what I'm saying. One in three Black women work in the public sector versus 1 in 5 of the everyday worker work in the public sector. And look, there was once a time where a couple of years ago, every corporation, every politician, every progressive nonprofit had a t-shirt, had a slogan, had a saying, stand with Black women, protect Black women, listen to Black women. People were walking around with the Stacey Abrams t-shirts talking about, let's listen to Stacey Abrams. Remember that? Remember that? I remember that. Do you remember that? Now it seems as though nobody wants to stand with, listen to, talk to, care about, fight for Black women. And here's why that's problematic. Let me sip my tea on this one. That's problematic in this moment because Black women losing their jobs is a leading indicator for an economy that's going the wrong direction. Okay? Let me pop my collar and allow me to repeat that. Black women losing their jobs is a leading indicator for an economy that's moving in the wrong direction. A couple of days ago, Moody's Analytics said that America is moving towards recession. And when you move towards recession, there's often a number of things that point, a recession's coming, a recession's coming, a recession's coming. And let me tell you one of those things that people don't want to pay attention to. Black women losing their jobs. Educated members of your workforce who want to work. Educated members of your workforce who've always contributed to the economy. Educated members of your workforce who work in sectors that are part of the public, paid for by tax dollars. When they start losing their jobs, you should get nervous. It should keep you up at night. It should make corporations weary. But we live in this era where we're not talking about diversity, we're not talking about equity, we're not talking about inclusion. Instead, we're like, I guess we're in this merit-only economy or this merit-only world. And in this merit-only world, when you overlook DEI and you overlook what's happening to Black women, you start to miss some of the warning signs of what's getting ready to happen to our economy. Now, you also miss what's been happening to our economy. Number one, Black women earn 64 cents to every dollar earned by a white man. So number one, this is why they're leading indicators of a problem. They have less cushion, they have less savings than white folks do, right? So when the layoffs hit them, they hit harder, which means they can't save, which means there's going to be more secondary and tertiary impacts to their layoffs. they're more likely to go into foreclosure. They're more likely to spend in the economy, right? So that when their layoffs happens, the impacts are faster and the impacts are deeper. Historically, Black unemployment happens before a broader recession hits fully. Black women are usually the first sign of job concentration and of economic viability. So this is not some niche statistics. I wish I was just talking out of my ass, but I'm not. Them losing their jobs at the rate that they're losing them is the sign of an economy weakening and the sign of an economy faltering. And I wish more people were paying attention to this. But once again, we like to ignore people of color. We like to ignore Black folks. But don't ignore this one. Don't move past this video. This video hopefully should alarm you, and I hope you share and you subscribe because this issue was not only important, but this issue is the warning sign that you could lose your job next. So pay attention. I'm Richard Fowler, and once again, we're just keeping them honest. I'll see you next time.